Hello, lords and ladies. This is just a quick catch-up video. It's a really short section of notes. Please email me if you didn't get the actual physical copy of notes. We are taking a test on Wednesday this week. Some of you are coming back by then. Most of you are not. But you should have everything you need. Don't forget the review sheet is posted in the classwork tab on Google Classroom. So we're going to run through the notes. Please email me any questions that you have. I know it's a weird time of year and there's a lot of stuff going on, but also be aware I can do a Google Hangout with you or a Zoom call if you need any specific questions asked or you're confused about something. We can do literally like a 3 or 4 minute face-to-face might solve a lot of the problems. So let me know. Let's do these notes real quick. So where we left off is Lexington and Concord happened. The colonists, in the form of a militia, have fired upon and killed British soldiers, and that is an act of war. Now, the king doesn't declare war because it's his own colonies, but he declares them an open rebellion. And if you're an open rebellion, that means you don't have to treat your citizens like citizens. The colonists are now at war. He can execute spies. He can search through houses for any reason. He can shut down ports. Basically, he gets to treat the colonists like enemies. In addition, other countries aren't supposed to trade with us or help us in any way because we're in open rebellion with England. We have not declared independence, so we've got about another year and a half between Lexington and Concord and the Declaration of Independence, where we're going to, in all reality, be at war. You know, we're fighting battles, we're putting together an army. We just haven't officially declared our independence. As far as England's concerned, we're already at war. As far as we're concerned, we haven't officially declared independence, but we're fighting. So, after Lexington and Concord, the Continental Congress meets again. They're going to call it the Second Continental Congress. What a catchy tune. They're, of course, going to meet in Philadelphia. The reason they choose Philadelphia is it's kind of in the middle of all the 13 colonies. The First Continental Congress just wrote a sternly worded letter. They took the position that England needs to lay off Boston and that we have every right to rule ourselves. But that's it. They didn't actually do anything. The Second Continental Congress is going to start doing things. And again, George Washington's in charge. All the big heavy hitters are here, including Thomas Jefferson this time. And they're going to actually start taking action. They're going to start building an army. Then you have to pay that army, and colonists don't like taxes, so they got no money. Of course, nobody's going to fight for an army without pay, not because they're not patriotic, but because their families need to eat. And this is a time period where women don't work. So if I'm going to leave my farm, if I'm going to leave my shop, if I'm going to stop doing my job, I need to get paid. Well, there's no taxes to pay them, so they just start printing money. Later on, I'm going to find out that money is useless. It's going to be another reason that we're going to have such a hard time keeping an army intact, is they weren't getting paid. They were realistically, for all intents and purposes, getting paid nothing. They did get paper, but hardly anybody wanted to accept that paper. And certainly, the British government did not recognize that paper money. So if you weren't going to sell your arms and ammunition or cow or whatever, or food to an army for nothing. Okay? The British were giving flat out gold and like real money that anybody in the world would take. The American army was giving out pieces of paper that nobody wanted. So it's kind of useless money, but they're starting. This is going to divide the country in 25, 25, 50. 25% of the country is going to support the revolution. Of the 13 colonies, only about a quarter of the citizens were all about the war. They're going to be known as patriots, and that's why the New England Patriots are known as the Patriots. They're out of Boston. New England's out of Boston, and this is where all the fighting's going on. So they're known as patriots. The people who wanted to stay with Great Britain and hated the revolution and were annoyed with everything that was going on were called loyalists because they remained loyal to the crown. Loyalist. The truth is, 50% of Americans wanted nothing to do with any of this. They just wanted to get up in the morning, do their job, go to sleep happy. They didn't want anything to do with all of this strife. A lot of them were a long way away from the fighting. African Americans and Native Americans almost exclusively sided with the British. Native Americans for obvious reasons. Out west, American colonists were slaughtering Native Americans. Anybody they found, men, women, children, killing kids before they got booted out of the area in the Ohio Valley. the Crown of England kicked the colonists out of the land and saved it for the Native Americans. So the Native Americans got to choose between these people who will kill my family if they see them, or these people who preserved all of our hereditary lands for us. Not a tough call. They side with the British. African Americans agree with the British mostly because in the country of England and in some of the other colonies, Great Britain had already outlawed slavery. So there was a belief that the British were more likely to outlaw slavery than the colonists who were dependent on slavery. The truth is that probably wasn't going to happen. England needed slavery for cheap goods. The whole point of their colony was to be able to buy cheap goods, and there are no cheaper goods than goods produced by slaves. So they weren't likely in the colonies to get rid of slavery, but in England itself, slavery had been gotten rid of. Of course, Americans were not going to get rid of slaves. They were dependent upon them. Even Northerners owned a lot of slaves at this point. So that was highly unlikely. So African Americans side with the British as well. So who's left? A bunch of white colonists who are angry. So one last attempt at peace. That Second Continental Congress also sends the Olive Branch Petition. The Olive Branch Petition is right here. It's a note to Dear King George, if you let us do whatever we want, stop telling us what to do. If you let us choose our own taxes. We still want to pay taxes, but we want to tax what we want, not what you want. And then we also want to determine what those taxes are used for. For instance, not soldiers that live in our houses. Okay? But if you stop telling us what to do and let us determine what we're going to pay in taxes and what those taxes are going to be used for, then we won't declare independence and we won't fight you. This was, as far as the king was concerned, extremely empty threat. It's like a 10-year-old saying, look, Mom and Dad, if you stop telling me what I have to do, and you let me eat whatever I want, and let me stay out as late as I want, and let me play all the video games that I want, then I won't punch you in the nose. Great Britain's not afraid of the colonies. They're sure they're going to crush us. We know historically they're wrong, but they're sure going to crush us. And also, having a colony that doesn't pay taxes and doesn't follow the rules you set for them is not a colony. So the King of England already considers the colonies in rebellion, wants nothing to do with this. As a matter of fact, when he's handed the Olive Branch Petition, he turns around and throws it in the fire. He's not even interested in a proposal at this point. It's over. For as far as the king is concerned, he has to crush us and teach us a lesson. So while the Olive Branch Petition is going from America to England, waiting for the king to read it, and the answer coming back to America, and we're talking like 4 months here, things don't move as quickly as they do nowadays. It had to go on a ship all the way to England and on a ship all the way back. While that's happening, Americans aren't sitting still. A group of militia from Vermont called the Green Mountain Boys take Fort Ticonderoga. And this is actual Fort Ticonderoga back here. Oh, go back. Down here. It's a star fort. You'll notice all the cannons are facing over here is water. They're not facing inland. The Green Mountain Boys, Fort Ticonderoga was not only a fort, but it was a trading outpost. So the Green Mountain Boys just walk in and take the fort because the British weren't expecting an attack because they didn't even know we were at war. Okay? The news travels slowly. The committees of correspondence had let Vermont know that we had put together an army and that we were going to fight Great Britain. The soldiers at Fort Ticonderoga didn't know about this. So they just take the fort. They kick the British out. And the big deal is, if England wants to send reinforcements down from Canada, they got to go right past Fort Ticonderoga, and they kind of control this trade route. The second thing is all these cannons here. America had no cannons at the beginning of the war. They still have no cannons that are useful because these cannons are way up in upstate New York, hundreds of miles away from where the fighting's going to be in Boston. But so they now have cannons. They just got to get them to Boston. And the Green Mountain Boys and a guy named Benedict Arnold and his army are going to spend an entire winter pulling these cannons mostly by hand. These like 6,000-pound cannons by hand and a few horses and mules, hundreds of miles in the winter, and get it all the way to Boston. So when spring shows up and all the snow melts and it's time to start fighting again, the British wake up to find George Washington standing there with a bunch of cannons, and it's really bad news for them. So it's almost like an amazing American feat they pull off here. But before those cannons show up, we got the Battle of Bunker Hill. Bunker Hill's outside of Boston. high ground was the key to war back then. If you had a cannon on high ground, it could shoot farther. You could shoot at things a long way away. If you were on high ground, ships couldn't shoot at you because ships can't shoot upward. If you had just muskets and you were at the top of the hill and you dug a little bit of a trench and hid behind it, the angle meant that you couldn't really get shot, okay? Because you were mostly blocked on the top of that hill by the angle, but you could shoot down and you got to see the entire human being coming at you. So high ground was huge. Well, England put cannons on Bunker Hill. They started putting up cannons on Bunker Hill. It was high ground over Boston. And the American militia, and at this point, what we called an army, they're not in uniform or anything, but we're calling them an army, go on neighboring Breeds Hill. And from Breeds Hill, they start shooting at the cannons and the people setting up the cannons on Bunker Hill. Well, General Howe puts together an actual army, like a couple thousand soldiers, and tries to dislodge the Americans from Breeds Hill. But as you can see in the painting down here, in typical British fashion, they get in a big rectangle, they got drummers behind them and people playing the flute, and they march straight up the hill. The Americans are dug in. They're behind earthen fortifications, which means they got earth in front of them. They're in a trench. They're hard to see. And the British just march towards them. The American general famously says, his name's Prescott, "Don't fire till you see the whites of their eyes," because they don't have any weapons. I mean, see, they don't have any ammo, and they have very little ammunition, very little musket balls, practically no gunpowder. They can't just take shots at these guys. They had to wait till they got really close. They open fire. The British fire back, but can't hit anything. The British run down the hill. They reform. They march straight right back up the hill. The Americans just start pegging them again, and Great Britain loses 1,000 soldiers. That's about as much as they lost in the Battle of Quebec against a star fort. Those forts that are almost impossible to beat. So the Americans inflicted like French-level casualties on these British people because they're so dumb coming up this hill. Then the Americans run out of ammo because they don't have any money. There's no weapons. The Continental Army isn't even really an army. There are a bunch of guys that agree to fight, but there's no taxes. There's no money. So it was almost like donated ammunition and ammunition that the army brought with them from their home. They run out. They run away. The British march up a third time and take the hill. And yes, the British won the hill, but this 1,000-soldier loss against basically shopkeepers and farmers, not trained military, is very embarrassing for them. And the British did take the hill, so they own the high ground out here in the harbor, okay, so they can protect their own ships, right? But that huge loss of men shows the British that they're going to have to rethink how they do things. They don't end up doing it, but they're not going to be able to crush the Americans easily. What they expected was they would march up that hill and the Americans would run for their lives. They didn't. The British are learning that the Americans are in this for the long haul. Then, come springtime, those cannons show up, and Boston's going to end up getting freed. And then we're going to run the entire war out of Boston. Boston becomes the center of the American Revolution. So interestingly enough, those Green Mountain Boys, those backwoods farmers in Vermont, who the British certainly would not have expected to win a battle, take Fort Ticonderoga, bring those cannons down to Boston, and average everyday men end up making it so we can win the Revolutionary War. It's a great story. All right, that should be it for the notes. That's the end of... Oh, nope, sorry. Nope, we went the wrong way. Yep, that's the end of the notes. Okay. If you have any questions, please ask. And if you need to talk to me, we can do a quick Zoom call or something. Good luck to all of you.